Hello and welcome back to VGC. We're here live on location in LA. I'm joined by the Guardian's Keith Stuart. How are you?
I'm good. I'm slightly jet lagged, but really pleased to be here.
This is the life of a British games journalist. Apparently, we just have to be expected to relocate to LA for most of the year.
Yeah.
It's brutal,
like migrating birds.
Yeah, exactly. I have now got the image of the LAX arrivals terminal with the mayor of LA smiling at me as if,
yes.
Welcome back. You're going to leave with some kind of tat, so enjoy that. I wouldn't say that about Nix. I think Nix is actually quite nice tat, you know.
Yeah.
So we're here to play Star Wars Outlaws, and we played some of it at SGF, as you might remember. But this was more of the kind of open world section of the game, which is seemingly more representative than the SGF build, which was 3 kind of 20-minute chunks. They're quite linear, quite kind of Uncharted levels.
Yeah.
Just off the top, how did you feel about what you played?
I've really enjoyed it. I think it's really worthwhile. I'm sort of glad that this is my entry point because I didn't play those like, you know, all of that stuff that was played a couple of months ago. So my entry point into this game has been like experiencing the open world, and I think that's the way to do it, the way to come in. Because I just felt like, as someone who's grown up obviously for the last 40 years of my life being immersed in Star Wars, the ability to just kind of wander around the streets and just like things just catching your eye. That's what I've really liked about playing it. Like, it might be a group of people huddled in the corner of a cantina or a ship landing somewhere in the distance, and it's just that kind of, oh, what's that? And wandering off and going to see it, which has been really nice.
It does a really good job of just setting up your eye line to have a lot of stuff like just discoverable. A lot of the time when you walk into buildings, there are some set up areas where you see a little white dot, and that'll be like, lean against a table like this, like you're Alan Partridge, and listen to listen to someone. But otherwise you can just kind of explore and see what the city's about. I mentioned earlier, it does have a bit of the video game of like, oh, there's a big score over here, don't tell anyone, but we've hidden this over here. But I'm not against that. It doesn't feel particularly Ubisoftish to me. Like, it doesn't feel like a Far Cry all that much. There's no towers that I've seen thus far.
No, exactly. That's weird. And it's like, I don't know, I'm sure they haven't taken cues from what Respawn did with the Star Wars universe, but it still has that Uncharted feel, but only in that the human beings feel like human beings and the places feel like places. And it's what it's not doing is that typical Ubisoft thing, although I have actually seen this once, of you pick something up and it says that's 1 of 10, and I have seen that just happening once, but it doesn't feel like the whole world is one just gigantic fetch quest.
And it feels like when you go out into the open area, the first one kind of we saw, I'm not sure how many there are in the game, but the first one we saw, it has enough, it doesn't feel like it has to be overwhelmed with stuff. There's like occasional little outposts, and there'll be a little story there, but it's a pretty wide open area. At one point in my demo, I don't know if you got this, an Imperial ship landed and took out some pirates, and they were like trying to reclaim stolen bounty, so you can go up and just like kill the Imperials, and they refer to the Imperials as imps in this. That's like slang. I've never heard that before.
No, I've not heard that. There's a few new slang words that I've not heard before that they're bringing into this. So
I mean, it makes sense. There would be that would develop, but when they were talking about the imps, I was like, who are like, I know my Star Wars races, and I was like, who are the imps?
I just thought they're suddenly bringing this sort of weird D&D element into it, which I was not expecting.
It's an interesting kind of setting, because obviously it's between Empire and Return of the Jedi, but you're in Kijimi, which is a planet from the Rise of Skywalker, which is interesting choice.
It's the one that Sith blew up, wasn't it? So I think, or was it?
It's the one that the woman who's Oscar Isaac's love interest in the last one, who never takes off her mask.
Yes, Kerry Russell.
Yes. It's that planet, which was cool to explore. Like, it's a great setting for a planet. But I thought that was solid. As far as gameplay goes, pretty standard third person shooting, but I thought it was perfectly serviceable.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's little systems and mechanics they've taken from throughout the world of open world games. Like there's the whole kind of instinct section where you can press down R3 and L3, and then that puts you into a kind of a sort of aiming, like slow-mo aiming thing, like Red Dead Redemption. So you can like target 3 or 4 enemies and then shoot them one after the other, which is like a little bit tricky to get the hang of, but once you do, you start using it as you're doing.
And it looks really great. Like, if you set it up, they do a lot of like the whole cinematic scoundrel thing, like that getting your last 3 shots off with that all feels great. There's like a pulse that gives you like Batman vision basically to see what's around. They're sneaking up behind. It's very limited stealth. It's like literally at one point I landed off a balcony that I shouldn't have, and like you are the stormtrooper and I'm Kay, and he just stood there didn't even look at me. So
and also what I found is that the stealth duck button and the jump button are consistently not what I'm expecting them. So I'm a lot of the times I'm like creeping up on baddies and then just suddenly jumping into the air. So that's not been great. But yeah,
the whole kind of gameplay hook is Nyx, which is this little character. It's the one that's on her shoulder on the cover art. You can use that. The game director described it perfectly. It's like an extendable hand into the world. It's like Nyx opens doors and distracts enemies and stuff like that. And I actually found, when you started you can hold one of the triggers and it'll paint like a little ghost of Nyx in the world, and you can choose to go over there. And I thought, okay, that's not as canned as I expected it to be. I thought it would just be, oh, there's a bomb over there, go over and do that, go over and do that. But yeah, I thought it worked quite well.
Yeah, I think so. I quite like the fact that it's multifaceted as well. Not only will he he'll distract enemies by doing a little dance, which I think is great, but also he will go and fetch things for you as well, fetch you weapons and fetch grenades.
Yeah,
I quite like that.
The weapons is another thing. So you've got your kind of standard like blaster, but also you can pick up Imperial weapons and stuff like that gets dropped, and they're super powerful, so that's pretty fun. It's weird because it adheres to Star Wars weapon lore when you're using those, because they're like one shot, they'll just go through and kill someone. But I was like blasting people in the head with my pistol, and they were just like,
oh, ow, oh, that stings.
But yeah, I thought the gunplay was pretty fun. Did you play much of the ship combat? We got like a little section of that.
A little bit, yeah, which I was having trouble with until I realised you're supposed to hold the left button to lock onto targets.
Yeah.
I was just drifting around a lot. It felt, I mean, it was nowhere near as good as the Star Wars ship combat that I remember being an old timer from X-Wing versus X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Yeah, it wasn't as complex as that, but it was still like okay. Weaving in and out of asteroids, that was kind of fun.
The ship stuff is still, like, we played that a few weeks ago, and that was still something that I'm a bit ho-hum about. I think it's sub Battlefront 2, like the reboot, that ship combat. I thought that's a good mix between the more hardcore stuff. The most recent example is that Star Wars Squadrons they did recently from EA, which I thought was pretty good. But that Battlefront is like in the middle of hardcore, and this, which is very basic. I almost wonder if the ship stuff is just there because it's like an expectation of like it's an open world game where you go planet to planet. I should be able to fly the ship, whereas if it was just like the Jedi games where you just sat down and you appeared at the other planet, I wouldn't mind too terribly much.
Yeah, although I was getting the feeling a little bit that there was a little bit of kind of open space feel to it. And there were ships you could go to explore, and wrecks you could go to. So it did have the sense you were still operating within an explorable space. But the combat wasn't quite working. But I know what you mean. It felt like they had to put it in, so they had to make a way of it working.
Because this is the whole thing they're going for, is like it's the first open world Star Wars game, and it's like, I feel like you could argue that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of is. But yeah.
Like Kijimi, it seems like it's just that city that you're in. You're not like across the whole planet. You're not like this big regional area. Like the first area was bigger. Obviously, it's open world is only ever going to be so open, and there's no point doing a Starfield and having like infinite masses of like nonsense. But I thought the areas we saw were quite cool, and obviously they've shown that you're going to Tatooine at some point to go to Jabba's palace, so they're doing some. So my boss Andy despises the current trend of Star Wars just being, remember these characters, remember these like these characters from the prequel trilogy, that now we're going to bring them back for Ahsoka and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So Jabba's in this, Lando's in this. How do you feel like they should handle legacy characters?
Well, I think when I spoke to Julian Garrity, the creative director, he was saying that they were they tried to be really careful in only using characters quite sparingly, and also the ones that it makes sense for him to be there.
Yeah.
And it really makes sense for Lando to be there because he's introduced in Empire Strikes Back, which this game immediately follows.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes kind of linear narrative sense for him to be there. And also it's his kind of realm. It's his, he's a scoundrel, and this is the world that he should be in. Jabba's obviously got to be there because he's one of the big kind of gang leaders. So he's got to be there. So I like the fact that they're not just like poking people in for no reason just because it appeals to our nostalgia. So I think that's kind of working out. And obviously in all the cantina scenes, they've got all of the sort of the typical cantina characters. You kind of, I know it's kind of trashy for them to be there, but you also want to see it. There's part of you that wants to see, Walrus Man.
They've canonized so many of the races in Star Wars at this point that they might as well just like stick them in there. Like it is cool to see. I tend to agree. Like I think the campaign for Battlefront 2 really took the piss, where like every level it was like, oh, here's Luke and here's Han and here's Leia. And
exactly, which is, they said they wanted to avoid that, and I think that's fair enough. But I think one of the things that I really love about it is that they've got the patina of the original Star Wars films. It's got that kind of almost kind of grainy look to them. And again, like Julian Garrity was saying, that he was kind of obsessed with the lenses that George Lucas used while making Star Wars, and he wanted to try and recreate them in the look of the game. And I think that this feels like a game that's been made by someone that watched Empire Strikes Back on VHS.
Yeah. And similarly to that point, a lot of the set dressing looks like old camera parts and stuff that they just made at the studio in London, like in the 70s. Like they do some stuff where I walked into an area and I found like a broken down pit droid, those droids from episode 1 that like they hit on the head and they all collapse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But other stuff just looked like back in the day when they were trying to make anything, they were like, put this tube together and this arm and this claw, and it's like, okay, this looks like OT stuff rather than the kind of Disney era stuff. Looks like it's trying to replicate OT in a way that's like kind of disingenuous and doesn't make sense, because it's like super clean Clone Wars, then the original trilogy looked terrible and dingy, and then the sequel trilogy kind of looks clean again. It's like a very specific strange thing. Obviously it's the issue of the people in the original trilogy look like they're from the 70s.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, and I think also they talked a lot about how they went to the original Ralph McQuarrie concept art.
Yeah.
And I had a whole batch of that. I had all the books on his art back in the 80s, and it's definitely, that feel is definitely there, and it is a kind of 70s, a 70s version of sci-fi.
Yeah.
And I think they've like brought that into this game quite nicely.
I agree. They've taken some stuff from this. Like, I'm not a sequel trilogy hater. Like, I really like The Last Jedi, but they've taken some stuff, like the music in the cantinas is very evocative of those tunes that Lin-Manuel Miranda made for Maz's Cantina, like the kind of beats and stuff like that. Because the thing that they always fell into in the past was it would just be the Cantina band. It would just be like the Jizz Whalers doing that, and as if that's the only music across the entire galaxy. I like that kind of atmospheric stuff, and that blends into the not John Williams score that's through the rest of it. Presentationally, it's a cheat code with Star Wars, because the blaster sounds are the blaster sounds. You know what that stuff. You can get into a Star Wars game so quickly with that stuff, but it feels like it's handled pretty well. I thought Kay has a difficult job being like a solo protagonist and having to like talk to Nix, who doesn't speak English back, and having to do a lot of like, that was close, we should go up here, but it didn't feel.
Got to be quiet, Nix.
How did you feel that fell on like the Aloy scale of speaking every 5 seconds?
I think it's lower down on the Aloy scale than Aloy. But Nix is a very handy, it's a very handy surrogate player, because she does get to tell Nix what we should be doing. We've got to be quiet here, Nix. It's almost like she's looking at the camera and like winking at us. But I think it's handled reasonably well. And what I do like about the character is she hasn't, like I was talking about this earlier, they haven't given her that completely OTT Disney sardonic character. I guess I'm a Jedi Knight now. So they haven't done that. She's kind of more subtle.
She doesn't feel like she's watched Star Wars. She doesn't feel like
or anything from the Disney universe.
She doesn't feel like a robot chicken character where she's like, oh, I wish I had the Force so I could move this. Like, she feels like she just happens to exist in that universe. Like they talked about on stage an example of like she'll meet Jabba at some point and she won't go, oh well, obviously it's Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah, that's
she'll be
it,
like,
yeah.
okay, like
all of these things that we've known for years, she's going to be experiencing for the first time. And I think that it does seem to have been handled quite well. But she has a massively difficult job to do as a character.
I thought the different kind of clans were interesting. Obviously, the Crimson Dawn, which was introduced in Solo, is like quite a big focus in this. They have Kira, not played by what's her face, Daenerys, Emilia Clarke, is it?
Yeah, that's it. It's not Emilia Clarke.
No, it's not. Yeah. It's Emilia Clarke-like. But yeah, I think it's an interesting batch of characters they have to work with because of where they are in the timeline. Like they can still. It's basically Return of the Jedi. It's where everything cuts off, and then there's the time skip to sequel trilogy. But in this, like they say, it's a year. They have all those little cartels and stuff like that. And we've not really spoken about the whole kind of cartel system where you do a job for one of them and it will say at the end, do you want to double cross the Hutts or do you want to turn it into the Crimson Dawn, and that gives you like a little reputation boost. That didn't scream to me like it would shut you out of too much. It might just change a couple of cutscenes. How did that like strike you?
I mean, it's very familiar to me as someone, and probably you as well, someone who's played a lot of big action adventure games where there are cartels, stroke syndicates, stroke factions, where you have to play this kind of reputation game. And the worry you've always got is that you are going to get locked out. And it seems as though in this game, though, it can be very up and down. Like you can do something that's going to annoy the Pike syndicate, but you can get back in with them by doing the jobs with them. But there are times where you can choose whether you're going to double cross them on purpose, but it does feel as if everything you do, you're going to be able to like claw that back again.
It basically just makes things a bit easier getting around the world. Like there's a few kind of almost Hitman style caged areas where if you're friendly you can just walk straight through, like if you have the credentials, or turn 90 degrees and there's a massive vent there that you can just go through.
That does. It's true that the Hitman analogy really works for those sections where you've got to infiltrate an area and steal something. But if you're friends with them, they'll just let you in.
I hope there's a way that you can just be like a total lying bastard and be friendly with absolutely everyone, like a real people pleaser.
Yes.
Like a total psychopath.
That's how I always want to play games. I don't want any enemies. I don't like it.
Because you get the feeling that like the kind of overarching villains that we've seen, they won't actually take much care as to who you're affiliated with. It would just be like, oh, there's a vendor that gives you a better gun or like certain equipment and stuff like that, and that's not bad. Like it added to a bit of flavour of the world when I was walking about Kijimi and I walked into an area and it did a wee like sting, it did a wee musical sting, and it's like, oh, you might get like caught here or killed or something like that.
I also like, it was quite clever the way they also use information as a commodity in the game. Like if you learn something and then you go to one of your quest givers, you get the option to like give them the information and withhold it and give it to one of the gang leaders. I thought that was quite nice, using information rather than just the latest MacGuffin as your bargaining chip.
There's a moment that we spoke about where you're exploring a mission area and you don't have to look at this data pad, but if you do, it says the horse race is fixed, here's the winner, and then you can go and bet on that and make your winnings and stuff like that.
I love the fact that one of the gambling arcade games is like the ones you used to find in Blackpool arcades, where you get like the horses and you can bet on one, and they're obviously, this being they're holographic horses that you're betting on.
It's the furry horses from Canto Bite from last, which is where Kay is from. She's from Canto Bite. So that's more sequel trilogy getting mixed in with OT stuff. So I thought it was that stuff is fun in that it's not just always here's a password for a safe to get you like 5 credits, the safe is here, the password is here. It's like, you can do this, then when you're leaving, if you remember where the table is, you can go and bet on it. I wonder how that works though, because I wonder if you find that information, is it just the next horse race you find anywhere in the world?
That's what I was wondering. Because those arcade machines are everywhere, and also how long have you got to get there? Have you got like
the guys are standing there like, oh Jesus, man, it's supposed to kick off hours ago. Like, it seems like money will be very easy to come by very quickly, but I suppose that's when it's a game like this, an open world game, money becomes meaningless so quickly anyway, so it's just a fun little thing.
And there's stuff everywhere to steal as well. People are leaving a hell of a lot of bracelets around it as well.
All this computer components and stuff like that, like stuff in my pockets with them. But final thoughts on what we've seen so far?
I think it's definitely appealed to me as someone that did watch those did watch the original trilogy on VHS and played with the toys.
Yeah.
And I was saying to Julian, it really felt like playing an open world Star Wars game is like playing with the toys when you first had the action figures, because there was like a couple of action figures you had that were like Hammerhead or Walrus Man that you had to invent your own stories for, and that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like it's really allowing that sense of gameplay again. So I really loved just wandering around. The people that were running the demos, I think, were getting quite frustrated with me because I wasn't making that. I was just like, wandering around looking at stuff, standing on a bridge and looking.
They've got tons of good adverts that I kept looking at, like all the posters and stuff like that. It's like, oh, the art team must have had fun doing this.
Yeah,
like,
watching the stormtroopers just wandering around and checking their guns, and then just like one stormtrooper I came across was just seemed to be like looking for something on the ground, like he dropped a contact lens or something. Don't know what he was doing, but fascinating stuff. So yeah, I've just it's very immersive. I think
it feels like, to me, the checklist was, does it feel like it could have existed like at that time in Star Wars and not introduced too much to be like, oh yeah, this was definitely here, you just didn't see it. This feels like it could have just been like a side adventure, like a book adventure almost. Like the old Legends stuff, the expanded universe stuff, this could have worked
and
in
the comics
that world
from that era as well, definitely. It
doesn't feel like
in 20 minutes.
Oh God, the shuttle is landing, so we better get out of here. Until next time, you can check out our coverage on VGC and The Guardian, which I believe is some kind of newspaper.
Yeah, it's old school. You won't know it.
I can't read, so until then, be sure to subscribe to VGC for all the latest Star Wars Outlaws content and Outlaw content. We break the law a lot over here. Until then, say goodbye, Keith.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next time.